History says it's happening again. If you look at the 2017 XRP chart and you compare what's been unfolding recently, very samey in a particular way. If you ask one popular chart analyst, which I'll be highlighting in this latest Moon Lambo Hot Jam, but not just that. I actually have commentary analysis perspective from 12 different XRP chart analysts, and they could not possibly be more optimistic that XRP absolutely, before this market cycle concludes, will hit double-digit price action, or at least close to it. They believe that the best is yet ahead. They do not believe in this thesis that we're in a bear market. And my humble opinion is that this is nothing more, we've been going through in recent months, nothing more than a mid-cycle correction. I do not believe for a moment that we're going to have the end of this cycle until you do have that euphoric blow off top. And there are tons of reasons as to why I believe that has to do with debt refinancing, global liquidity, the business cycle, ISM, which is a key component of a business cycle. All of it's intertwined, and we are not done. It would be a little weird if not. I mean, unless it technically bleeds into the early part of 2027. Okay, maybe. Never say never, I suppose. It's crypto anyway. But if the macro thesis that Raoul Pal and Julian Biddle have put out, and that many others, including myself, agree with, if that is correct, it's got to happen sooner than later. And this is a hell of a good start to the year, don't get me wrong. But whether it's halfway through this year or later part of 2026, with all of the actual, because think about this, understand that loans, they're hitting in mass, their maturity dates throughout this calendar year. So it's not that there's literally one single moment, but let the year pass, and you're going to see individual bursts. Like there will be some really individually big days if this theory absolutely ends up coming to pass. And we do know, it's just based on data, that if you're talking about global liquidity, tracking risk on assets, even before crypto existed, go back decades, it's got a very high correlation. And that's because it's that's not because, but it happens to be causal. And that correlation is there about 87% of the time, according to Raoul Pal. And so you can have, what I'm saying is you can have some deviations, but they can't last that long. And the reason you can have deviations is there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, hell, look at what happened today, which I'm not getting into, the Venezuela stuff. Geopolitical stuff can happen, and you can have deviations for some period of time. That's just one example. There's a lot of moving parts on planet Earth, but still, even if you get a decoupling in the short term, it's going to snap back. So if the thesis is correct, and I'd be shocked if it's not, then yeah, we're almost certainly going to see some fireworks this year. So I don't really, honestly, at this point, I don't doubt the thesis, because after I research it more and more, I'm like, no, this goes back way before crypto by decades and decades. It's just a question of, could you have a short-term deviation? And that is possible. I do acknowledge that. So as to whether or not, we're going to see fireworks, I don't technically know. Of course not. Nobody does. But if we're going to see them this year, I just think the odds favor yes. Look at this, XRP at $2.03, Bitcoin at $91,268. I just want to mention this headline. This is from Cointelegraph. U.S. national debt crosses $38.5 trillion as Bitcoiners celebrate Genesis Day. And that's pretty cool. I mean, the debt isn't thrilling. I mean, well, okay. I hate to say this. I hate that it's happening. I'd rather it not be the case. I'd rather just have a country, the United States, which I live in, very fond of the United States, as it turns out. I'd rather the government just be fiscally responsible. I would actually genuinely prefer that. But since they're not, I do believe that over the long haul, people who get into scarce assets like cryptocurrencies, including XRP, we're gonna benefit from this. And I understand that crypto, it's treated like risk on assets like stocks. So you might think, well, what do you mean? Well, okay, I absolutely buy into the narrative. You let enough time pass. There's a chance at least that it's going to behave differently rather than just the typical risk on. But I'll say this, even if it doesn't, there's so little money in crypto now compared to where it will be in the future. You still get the benefit regardless of how it's being treated. So even if it always stays treated like a typical risk on asset, ain't going to matter. And then the fact that Bitcoin, so this is Genesis Day, January 3rd, 2009 is when Bitcoin produced the first block. Through Bitcoin's proof of work mining, their shitty mining system, which is the most archaic, awful way to achieve consensus in all of crypto because Bitcoin is the least sophisticated and worst crypto ever created. I am thankful for it, though. It's one of my largest individual crypto holdings. It just turns out it doesn't need to be very advanced to, have broad adoption. Just the fact that it was the first to exist is enough. Okay, I accept that happily. But think about that. It's been around 17 years now. So it's made it, right? It's made it. Well, what about XRP? XRP's, you understand this summer, XRP will have been in existence for 14 years. At what point, I know that you guys, you're on board, right? But I just have to ask for the haters out there. At what point do you just admit that you're wrong and XRP is here to stay? If 14 years isn't long enough for you to figure out that you're fucking wrong about XRP, how much more time do you need? Like another 14 years? What do you need, idiot stick? Because obviously XRP is an early winner of the crypto space. And so as I saw that headline, I was just like, yeah, great, good. That's fantastic for Bitcoin. Think about XRP now, because there are only 3 coins that have always been in the top 10 coins by market cap for their entire existence. And that's Bitcoin, it's Ethereum, and it's XRP. And even with the United States government under Biden trying to destroy XRP, they failed. That wasn't enough to knock XRP out of the top 10 coins by market cap. It's an obvious early winner. And the more time passes, the more obvious it is. So I just wanted to mention that too. Just saying. On Bitcoin's birthday, if you want to call it that. Here's a post from the great Matsby. He says, since 2018, Bitcoin wicking below the lower weekly Bollinger Band has marked the bottom the majority of the time. The only exceptions were in 2022, the red arrows, when the bear market was already well underway. Bitcoin is now doing it again. If history and the trend hold, this signals the bottoming process before we head to new highs. Okay, so Bollinger Bands, of course, don't indicate which direction we're going to pop. It just notes, hey, volatility has been reducing. And when that breaks, you get a notable pump one way or the other. So if the bears are right, you're going to get another red arrow, aren't you? You're going to see a trend to the downside, but if the bulls are right and we're not actually in a bear market, then when this thing does do its next huge move, think way higher. It doesn't mean that it can't go lower to whatever degree in the short term. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying at some point when the Bollinger Bands expand to a notable degree, I don't think the bears are going to be proven right here. I'm skeptical of that. I'm skeptical of the bears being right. Let's just say that. Here's another post from the great Matsby. XRP is bouncing perfectly on the 21 EMA on the monthly chart. More evidence the bull trend is very much alive. Okay, that's a popular perspective from the XRP chart analysts that I follow. XRP is actually really sitting pretty. And here's another one from him. This is from the great Matsby also. XRP USD. He says, XRP also has a perfect rectangle pattern and prices near the bottom of the range. All-time highs are still coming. That's right, folks. I know it's been a long time, and despite the fact that XRP did hit a new all-time high last summer of $3.65, it's still in a range. As silly as that, and surprising as it might sound to somebody if they're new to crypto, it's normal. This is a very, very, very long range. We've been through worse, though. We've consolidated for the better part of a decade. Think about before XRP finally broke out in 2024. How many was that, like 7 years or whatever? Somewhere in that range. Welcome to being a responsible investor, because to be a responsible investor, to be an adult, does require actually having patience, it turns out. You do not choose when XRP goes. But when it does, you get to choose whether or not you have exposure when it happens. It's going to happen. I'm going to be here. I'll tell you that. 100% chance I'm going to be here when this mofo blasts to the upside, because at some unknown point in the future, it's going to happen. The fundamentals for XRP have never been stronger. The war on crypto is over. More and more money is going to flow in. The fact that the government won't stop printing freaking money right there should tell you that's a huge clue. Do you have a raging clue right now? That's a raging clue. Yes, absolutely. You're not going to have this thing. You're not going to have this thing collapse when the government won't stop doing. It's just not going to happen. It's never going to happen. And businesses keep taking on more. There's so many reasons. Here's a post from Crypto Wizard. He said, could it be? History seems to be rhyming again. XRP formed a multi-month sideways range, had a huge capitulation, and has formed a falling wedge. Back in 2016/2017, this happened before a parabolic rally. Is this time different? And the chart that you're seeing here, it's actually the market cap for XRP. So he's showing a falling wedge specifically for that. Bottom shows all the way back to 19-2, basically. What's this, 2014? And then the top chart shows back to the end of 2024. And that's what he's highlighting right here. So that falling wedge has been happening for the last few months, basically. And he's not the only one that's noticed this. So again, this is a market cap XRP chart. But even if you look at a price chart for XRP, like this one, this from Sistine Research, XRP update, falling wedge. Noticing the same thing falling since basically the liquidation event. That's not going to be a surprise to anybody. He's noticing the same thing, falling wedge. And then there's also Crypto Insight UK. He wrote, win all-time high. He drew the same thing, basically. It's a falling wedge. This wick right here, that's October 10th, obviously. That's where he drew the top of this top line. So a lot of analysts have noticed. So you can look at it on a market cap chart or an XRP USD chart. Either way, these formations tend to resolve themselves. So if we're not in a bear market, this bodes well. These formations, I'm no chart guy, but I do know, I've been here long enough to know that these formations tend to resolve to the upside, my friends. Here's a post also from Crypto Insight UK, XRP USD on the screen. It says, nice little squeeze off the lows yesterday. XRP reclaims its year-long range. If we can get a strong close today, we will see the weekly close above our recent downtrend. This should, in turn, give us a minimum target of $2.90. I expect we will see new all-time highs this year. So, folks, he is still firmly in the camp of this thing ain't over. The best is yet ahead. And he has in the past, and he hasn't deviated from this, called for double-digit price action for XRP, minimum $10. But he thinks more realistically, there's a good chance we're going to be peaking somewhere between $20 to $30. Here's a post from Dark Defender. He says, update on the 3-day time frame. We had the RSI Golden Cross XRP will melt faces. So relative strength index all the way downhill. And he's still thinking in the short term, we're going to hit $5.85 is what he's targeting for this move. Now, he is charted as high as a little over $18. That's the highest that I can recall. I haven't seen him chart. I don't know for sure if that's where he thinks the peak is coming, but that's all for this market cycle. So all these guys here are in the camp that the cycle hasn't ended. It's just an elongated cycle. I haven't seen any of these analysts articulate anything differently. Here's a post from Charting Guy. He says, clear as day what happens next. So we shared a couple charts. This one's a Bitcoin USD chart going back to the end of 2022. You can see this a 5-way progression to the upside for Bitcoin. He's noting that is indeed what has played out. Normal charting stuff. And he's basically just showing you here with this XRP chart, same thing's happening here. It's just that XRP's final burst to the upside, it's just lagging, which is historically normal, by the way. And it makes sense, in terms of investments flowing into crypto, everything goes into Bitcoin leads the way. That's where you start, and then you go further out the risk curve. That's just normal human behavior. So XRP and the rest of the altcoins come next, but he's targeting $8 here, specifically $8.29. And he hasn't denied that it could go higher. He even acknowledges it could go over $20. He doesn't predict that though. Here's a post from X-Force Global. XRP $10 plus is not a matter of if, it will happen. So he's not changing his conviction either. Number go up. Here's a post from chart analyst Tara, and this is from just this afternoon. XRP is beginning to look a lot like a new trend. The RSI is continuing to print bullish and is not signaling a top yet. I marked local supports in green, which looks like the $2 level has now flipped to support. Holding these levels means that $2.11 to $2.15 is next. Bitcoin has also held the major $90,000 support level. This should help XRP hold and push to higher targets. Midterm, still expecting $103,000 resistance on Bitcoin, which should line up with XRP reaching its resistance at $2.30. I'll keep you updated as it continues. So another analyst who's very optimistic for the short term and does not think the cycle is over, very obviously. Here's a post from chart analyst Steph's Crypto. On XRP's 3-week time frame, the stochastic RSI has dropped to 0. That's extremely rare and has only happened once before at the 2022 bear market bottom. On such a high time frame, this indicator only reaches zero when selling pressure is fully exhausted. It means momentum to the downside has dried up, not that price must instantly reverse. And so I'll pause a note here. I've seen tons of analysts talking about how XRP is in a bottoming phase. I've seen tons of analysts that I follow talk about how Bitcoin's in a bottoming phase. So whether it's literally right here, if it's behind us or a little bit ahead of us, whenever that bottoming will be or has been, it's roughly in this range, and everything's pointing to that being the case. Everything's pointing to ultimately we're going higher from this. And then he says, last time the signal appeared, XRP entered an accumulation phase before the next major move higher. Seeing it again suggests downside risk is structurally limited and that long-term holders are absorbing supply rather than distributing. Yeah, rather than selling is what that means. Exactly. That is what you're seeing. XRP has been holding ridiculously strong. Ever since that November 2024 burst to the upside, it's just been in that range. It's just been living in that range of, roughly a little, you could say technically a short period has been a little under $2, but mostly above $2 to a little over $3. That's where XRP lives now. Most of the time I've held XRP, it's been worth more like 20 to 40 cents. I've been holding since 2017. That's how long we've been suppressed. The market's making up for it, my friends. We were right. And we're going to have more. Like, we've had a lot of fun. I argue we have after, being proved to be on the right side of the history with that SEC nonsense. That's over. XRP's got legal clarity. The war on crypto is now over. So even it's just additional broader vindication here. It was great seeing XRP hit multiple new all-time highs in 2025. But, and as fun as that was, and it really was, the most fun is ahead. We are going to see XRP melt faces. The idea that the last face melting rally that would ever happen for XRP occurred in 2017 is absurd to me. With this strength and a nearly 14-year track record, no, absolutely not. It's just that there's only been a chance once every cycle for it to show what it's going to show. This cycle, we haven't had an alt season yet. And last one, XRP got screwed because of the SEC. So we haven't had that time. But the market's positioning here very obviously. You can see the institutions are. That's very clear. Here's a post from Chartner. XRP. Patterns care less about opinions. This still remains a potential ABC correction mimicking 2017's consolidation before a vertical expansion. Ignore the noise. Let the structure unfold. So there's another analyst that believes what we're seeing right now looks kind of like what we've seen in the past. And if indeed history rhymes with itself, you're looking at a way more expensive XRP. And he has been charting upwards of $27 XRP this market cycle. Here's another one from him. This is an XRP BTC chart. He says XRP against Bitcoin pair signals that a large move is brewing as it compresses between support and resistance over a 13-month time period. Exactly. This thing, and again, it's an XRP BTC chart, compression, folks. When this thing breaks, I think it's going to be a doozy. I think that's a reasonable thing to speculate. Here's a post from CW. XRP is about to reach a selling wall. The battle will break through. The resistance levels will now begin. So there's a few key levels there. The bottom one, I think he didn't cite it, but he did in a separate post. So I'm thinking that's about $2.09. So it's not going to be a perfect straight line up, but you will have some days where there's going to be some excitement. You're like, I'm optimistic. We're going to have a lot of fun in 2026. I do believe before the cycle's over, we're finally going to get ours. I really do believe that. Nobody can know for sure. I'm not pretending to know. Just that I'm careful with my words here. I don't know what's going to happen. I could be wrong. I'm just telling you what I believe is most probable, and I just go into great detail articulating why I believe what I believe. Here's a post from me, Greg Crypto. XRP monthly RSI is talking, and it's interesting. Ooh, tell me more, Greg Crypto. It says the monthly RSI drop into the 50 zone and bouncing is presenting the following: momentum resets, weak hands exit, base forms, and expansion follows. We're back in that zone and RSI is bouncing up, not breaking down. This looks far closer to previous bounce setups than the one failure case. And so he notes that he thinks there's a 60% chance that, trend slowly strengthens from here. 30% chance it's going to move sideways for a bit. 10% chance it breaks down from here. But he notes only if macro support fails. And then he says RSI isn't screaming parabolic yet, but it's saying reset complete, accumulation phase maturing. Expansion comes if/when RSI pushes toward 70 to 80. Yeah, and that'll be neat because once you get into above 70, that's oversold territory. And the neat thing about that is oversold territory can persist for a pretty long time, maybe even weeks. And if that happens, the degree to which XRP is just going to rip faces off, it's going to be so fun. Like, we're finally going to get ours. It's been a longer journey than most of us were hoping or expecting. Not our faults, but we still going to get it. And we don't get to choose when the market goes. So we're either here or we're not. I'm here. I've made my decision. That is that. I'm telling you, and I do mean this, I am no less patient than I was in 2017 because that is what it takes to be successful investing. You have to have that attitude. You have to have the long-term horizon in mind or you're really going to struggle. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea.